Mixing it up on this episode, instead of having poetry at the beginning, I'm going to have some music. This is a song by Ace of Base, All That She Wants, and it's being performed by Cameron Crease from the Mercian Regiment. Enjoy.
When she woke up late in the morning light and the day had just begun, she opened up her eyes and gosh, oh what a morning. It's Saturday for work, it's a day for catching tab, just lying on the beach and having fun. She's gonna get you all that she wants. Here's another baby, she's got tomorrow, boy, all that she wants. Here's another baby, yeah. All that she wants. Here's another baby, she's got tomorrow, boy, all that she wants. Here's another baby, yeah. Oh, do 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 do, do 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 do, do 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 do, do 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 do. So you drew her inside and the thing is right. She's a hunter, you're a fox. The gentle voice that talks to you won't talk forever. It is a night for passion, but the morning means goodbye. Be with it's flashing in your eyes. She's gonna get you all that she wants. Here's another baby, she's got tomorrow, boy, all that she wants. Here's another baby, yeah. All that she wants. Here's another baby, she's got tomorrow, boy, all that she wants. Here's another baby, yeah. Oh, do 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 do, do 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 do, do 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 do, do do
So that was performed by Cameron Crease. I personally think that was amazing. And if you want to hear more from Cameron, go to ccrease22 on Instagram. He's got some fantastic work on there and you won't be disappointed. You're listening to Blue Pigment Podcast, sponsored by Huscarl. Go to huscarl.co.uk to find yourself some amazing printouts, stickers and t-shirts. Use the discount code BluePigment for 10% off. On October the 14th, 1066, the Battle of Hastings, King Harold had fallen, yet his loyal bodyguards, the Huscarl, continued to fight, holding their oath to him until the last man was killed. The Huscarl brand now stands for that committed cause and loyalty to a shared brotherhood, all combining with a passion for great design. They seek to continue the Huscarl ethos, providing the ultimate in design, quality and sustainability. Their products are showcased by the modern day Huscarl. Follow the you, not the fallen. I have just lied to you during that advert. The actual percentage you get off is 15%. Use discount code BluePigment at huscarl.co.uk. Get yourself 15% off. Get yourself one of those amazing Huscarl t-shirts and it'll be like, I've got one, it's got it now, no one else can have it, it's mine. Or words to that effect. All right, so I'm going to get talking to a guy now called El Chi. I've had his poetry on a previous episode, but I don't actually know that much about him. So I'm going in a bit blind on this one. Kind of like a mysterious guy, El Chi. I don't think I've ever heard of that name before. So I'm hoping to learn a bit more about him. I've heard some of his poetry. I'm going to play some of it for you now. And then we'll get cracking on straight with the interview. Hope you enjoy this poem.
Scared Stiff by El Chi. Watching the news, shedding a tear. A smug politician says, "Lend me your ear." These are dangerous times, and everything is to fear. Fear of the night, afraid of the dark, not slept a wink, up with the lark. Fear of the virus, it might see us off. Must fear the people who developed a cough. Fear of the foreigners, they're different to us. Better suffer in silence and don't make a fuss. Fear of the additives put in our food, some reality TV to lighten the mood. We must fear the Russians, for they'll start a war. Better close all the windows and bolt all the doors. Fear of the Muslim who lives down the road. More reality TV will lighten the load. Fear is the lash that keeps us in line, a tactic they've used time after time. I'm tired of their mantra, it's bad for the health, when we've nothing to fear but fear itself.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by LG, former member of the army, and also a former member of the police, a poet. Are you still an active poet?
Yeah, I still write mainly for my own. I just write them, you know. I've never published anything until I've heard about you, and you kindly put some on YouTube, but I've never ever really sort of publicised them. I put a few on Facebook before, but that's about it, really.
No, yeah. So when I got told about you, I'd listened to some of your poetry. Somebody had sent some across, and I was like, "This is cool. This is really good." And got talking to Susie Stanford as well from Military Veterans Creative Arts, and she's made some audio files of like your poetry, but with somebody else reading them out, I believe.
Oh yeah.
Really good, with some background noise to sort of give it that dramatic effect. Really, yeah, really good little visual or audio, should I say?
Yeah.
So how did you get into your poetry?
I've always pretty much always written it. I've had big gaps in my life where I haven't written any. I pretty much started as a child. I wasn't very academic at school with most subjects, but English, I picked up English language and English literature. I just loved the lessons, you know, strangely enough. And I suppose as a kid, I had a pretty sort of rough upbringing, and we weren't a rich family, a pretty poor family, and I just found it helped sort of communicate with myself, if you can, you know, it's difficult to explain, but sometimes it stops that conversation in your head and gives you something different to focus on.
Yeah, that's good. A really good way of putting it. I think I'm probably quite similar to you. The poetry itself is a good way of expressing emotions in a way that is more punchy and has more of an effect. But I'm dyslexic, so when I write something or I read something, it's a lot easier for me to read it when it rhymes, if in a way. Which is strange, but so I connected through that, and that was a way of me sort of being able to write, being able to read, and develop my education in reading and writing from a young age. I don't know if I wouldn't say that I'm severely dyslexic, just very minor dyslexia, but that is definitely that's definitely aided me into, as like a bridge into reading and writing other things. So going from poetry and then picking up books and other forms of communication and stuff. So yeah, it's really good. So one of the poems that I first heard of yours was Scared Stiff. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that one?
Yeah, I wrote that. I'd started watching a lot of. I retired from the police last year. I wrote that long before I retired, but I started watching, for some reason, watching a lot of more news than I used to watch. I'd pick up the news in a car, like we all do. We're driving along, and top of the hour, and the news comes on. But I'd started taking an active interest in the news, and I was watching everything from Al Jazeera, RT, BBC. So I was watching a wide variety of programs. Not consciously for any reasons, just like you do, you channel surfing. Oh, what was this news? I was even watching foreign ones I couldn't even understand, just for the visual. But I came to the realization that a lot of the time, a lot of the stuff we're shown, whatever it's about, seems to always have that fear aspect in it to make you feel. There's the bogeyman's in the cupboard, or like when you were, a kid, the bogeyman under the bed. And in reality, pretty much day-to-day mundane life, there's nothing really to fear. Obviously, in your world, in the past, you've obviously had things to fear, and the same with me. But day-to-day, every day, and that really sort of spurred me on to write that. But it's strange because I don't, as a matter of fact, sit down and say, right, today I'm going to write a poem. I literally can't do that. It's an impossibility for me. I'll have occasions where I'm deep in thought, or something will crop up. I'll see something on the telly, and I'll start to, I could be anywhere. I've been at work before, and something's come into my head, just a phrase or a line, and I write it down. I write everything down. So I write it down, put it in my back pocket, and then I'll keep going over that every now and again, and then I'll find another rhyme, the thing that rhymes or that maybe doesn't rhyme, and I'll add that. And eventually I've got this. If I put that out, if I showed you that, you'd look and think, crikey, what's that about? And then I'll put it all into sort of context. And that's how that came about, really. It's just, I was looking, thinking, every day you see on the net, and it's all about fear. It's all about making people, you fear tax rises, fear this, fear that, fear the other. And to a lot of people, that's really important, because, there's a lot of people on low wages and struggling. But the actual fear side of it, fearing life, and that's how I wrote it.
Yeah, I completely get that, especially when you said about the boogeyman. It's like when you're a parent, and I don't know if I've been guilty of this with my kids, but like, oh, don't run around that corner because, there could be a car coming, or, and you used, there's no car coming. You already know there's no car coming, but you say that in order to keep them safe and keep them in the place where you can see them and you can look after them, control them in a way.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's the news doing that. It's like, you better watch out. There's something bad coming. So you better hunker down, and you better, pay your taxes. And I completely
it was really like, it was also things like, I've updated that a few times. I've got a current version of it, because obviously it goes a little bit out of date. And when the COVID, when the pandemic was at full swing and we were on lockdown, obviously I was still working because I was in the police and I was going to work daily. But I don't remember if, I think the one I sent you had that COVID bit in it.
Yeah, that's right.
But prior to that, I've wrote that about 6 or 7 times over a long period of time, and I've changed it for various things. And the COVID was one of the things I changed. And recently I've started to put a little bit about the asylum seekers, and how that's sort of fed to us as if these people are going to take over. There's too many of them, and there's whatever people agree. It's not for me to change people's opinions. We've all got our own opinions, and every opinion is important. But very much that another thing, you see it and you think, oh, the fear again. We're not going to have any jobs because millions of people are coming over, and it's just that whether it's done. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but whether it's done on purpose, whether there's an agenda there, or it's just the media being the media. But yeah, so I've changed that a few times.
Yeah, I think it's like humans are like inherently love. It's like we like being scared. Like we watch horror films because we like being scared, and it sells. That kind of story sells. It's like, oh, what's going on over there? You know, something really bad's going on in Nigeria, or something really bad's going on in
Yeah,
Australia. And it's just sort of like, that's, I
yeah,
wouldn't have a clue about that if you didn't tell me. And I would have just gone on my merry way and just been happy.
yeah,
But now I'm a
yeah,
bit down because some koalas have, you know, need saving in Australia or something like that. And it's
yeah,
completely irrelevant in my life at the time.
yeah,
Oh, you know, poor koalas, but that's the point. They're pulling on your heartstrings, and they're pulling on
yeah,
your.
yeah,
It's like a science. They've got it down to a T
yeah,
to to know what people will want, and that what they're selling in the media is a story, and
yeah,
they want people to buy it, and that's
yeah, yeah.
that's how they make their millions. And we're all buying into it. We continue to
It,
buy into it.
it's all part of the consumer culture that we're in nowadays, and of course, it's no different than selling someone a car, or they want us to buy their product. So the newspaper, they'll have the headline, print sound, whatever it is, or trying to be the most controversial. It's not always the most helpful, but as you say, yeah, totally agree. It's just another part of the consumer culture in a way. I mean, we need news. And I don't know whether I've got old git syndrome. I don't know how old you are, Ash, but I'm 56 now, and I think as you get older, you trust it less. But you also become more overly cynical, and I'm not really sure where I stand, whether I've just got old git syndrome or I'm reading it right.
I think I might be on the same wavelength, because I as soon as I see the news and some picture comes up, I'm like, that's one side of the truth.
Yeah,
Let me think about all the other avenues that there could be that is real as well.
yeah,
But you could get yourself wrapped up in all sorts of stuff. I was thinking just now that there was a news article. It was a few years back, and it was about a politician using his work laptop to watch some pornography or something like that, as some adult videos, and that was like the big thing in the media about this this politics. I was thinking there are people in different countries that are getting kidnapped regularly, like hundreds and hundreds of people getting kidnapped regularly on a regular basis. And the biggest news story of the day was somebody injecting a political opinion via the news against this politician because he'd watched something on his laptop. It's like, who cares? Just leave the guy alone.
Well, there's an example of it now in the news where they're, don't get me wrong, I am quite political, and I have certain issues with authority, which sounds a bit strange considering I was I was in the army, police officer. I don't mean to say that I don't agree there should be authority figures, and I'm not one of these subversive, I'm not about to go and blow myself up. But I do have an issue with some aspects of power when it's misused, obviously, like we all do. But it's that, a case at the moment is the media saying about, and now I'm no way a Tory, but Boris Johnson. I'm the first one to criticise Boris Johnson, but the fact that he's gone on holiday, and I'm thinking he has a 2IC, second in command, as you and I both know. Not sure who'll watch this podcast, but they might not know that terminology. But he has, deputy prime minister, and surely the man's got to have a holiday. and the news angle was he's telling us that we're going to be paying more for our gas, more taxes, and yet this man's taking his wife and family on holiday to Spain. And you think, so you might as well say that everyone who's doing quite well in life can't have a holiday, because do you see what I'm saying? It's
yeah. It's that fear thing again, isn't it? It's like
yeah. I'm going to be freezing cold this winter, and he's sunning himself in Marbella or whatever. I'll just put an extra
he went to university and he studied hard, and he's got to where he's got.
Well, I don't begrudge him off.
No. I'm remember. I've got to steer away from too much politics. But so some of the other lines in that same poem, "Scared Stiff." Is there any of that sort of like, a personal fear of anything that you're personally scared of, or?
Yeah, sure.
Or is all of it?
I probably started off the first maybe 12, 15 years of my life scared of everything, mainly possibly because of an influence of parents, but just worrying about everything and anything. And I think very much the military sorted me, because when I joined the army, I suddenly realised, hang on a minute, I'm part of a bigger picture here. I've got people around me, the comradeship, the bad side of it, But and I joined in 1983, a year after the Falklands, and I'm not sitting here saying I've never been afraid. There's a lot of things I've been afraid of, but as I've got older, and I think that's reflected in the poetry, I suppose maybe even subconsciously I'm guilty of what I'm saying. I've been afraid of this, I've been afraid of that, afraid of the person down the road because they're different from me, and maybe not always consciously, but yeah.
But then that realization of like, oh, these things scare me. I've realized that now, and I can sort of self-analyze that now and go, hang on. And that's basically the meaning of the poem. It's like, what's the last phrase of that poem is, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And it's that realization that I'm scared of all these things. Why am I scared? Oh, it's just me. It's self-fulfilled pressure.
Yeah.
And that's
it is the worst thing, is the fear, isn't it? It's like, don't open that, be afraid of what's in that box. Well, unless I could sit there all my life looking at that box and being afraid, or I could open it, and what's the worst that could happen? And that's the realization that the fear can be the worst thing. And we all know, you've been there, I've been there, that the fear is often not as bad as the reality. It's like you go for a procedure in a hospital, or you're going to have a filling or whatever, and most of us, that sort of system's set up to worry, isn't it? You're worried about worry. And afterwards you come out all sort of blasé. I remember a quick example of this was when I was posted to Belize. I was only 21, never been abroad. Well, I'd been in Germany, BAOR, but I'd never been, we'd never traveled on planes as kids, never had holidays. Luckily, we lived by the sea anyway. And I worried about it, and I was frightened. Oh, I'm going to this place, there's a jungle. I've heard about spiders and snakes, and, will I be all right? Will I be homesick? Blah, blah, blah. And when I got back, I was all full of myself and blasé, the worry. And not until later in life that you reflect, and part of it's through writing, that it's almost self-help, self-analyzation.
Yeah.
And again, sometimes I'm not conscious of it, but in retrospect, talking to you about it, there's obviously an element of that. I'm writing stuff down, and it's almost like healing, and finding out who I am.
Yeah, it could go from like the smallest thing. So whenever I get a new group of people that I'm teaching or working with, and you do say, for instance, an icebreaker, and it's just a simple icebreaker of introducing yourself, telling maybe a funny story about something that's happened, that sort of icebreaker. And when you're going around the room and you know that it's coming up to you next, you start getting a bit nervous, like, oh, I've got to tell this story about myself. And what if everyone thinks I'm an idiot and starts taking a piss out of me or whatever? And then by the time you finish it, you're like, what the hell was I nervous about that for? It was nothing. It was absolutely nothing. And there was no reason.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same with a different sort, the other side of the spectrum, me being the parachute regiment, jumping out of planes, of going for that process of like, I'm not scared. But that it's a barrier. It's a barrier. I'm not scared. Oh, I'm tough. I'm going to jump out of the plane, whatever. And then you're putting on this tough facade. And then when you've actually jumped out of the plane and you've landed on the ground, you're all giddy, like, hey, I was just in a parachute. Well, how was it? And everyone's chatting to each other, like, how was yours? Oh, mine. I nearly didn't drop my kit. All this sort of, stuff that starts coming out. And everyone's talking about it. But before that, they're a bit sort of barriers up, defensive.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other. So I've actually feel like with some things over time and learning myself and being a bit more mature, there's some things that I'm completely irrelevant, not feared, not scared of doing at all. But then there's other things that now I'm a dad that completely changes things on the head. Like you start thinking more in depth, like, hang on, this time I jump out of a plane, if I do get injured, I've got the kids to think about and the wife and all that sort of stuff. And that self, it sort of like brings it back that you're not invincible.
Yeah. And it's not just me now in the world that I've got to look out for, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally agree.
So yeah, that both those poems that I've had on a previous episode, we'll talk about is legatum in a moment, but Scared, Stiff, and Legatum, they're kind of, in a way, they are poems and poetic, but they're very like speechy as well. Like they could almost be a speech, you know, like a very well rehearsed speech that you'd give somebody to increase their confidence or increase their want to get more out of life.
Yeah,
That's how I found them anyway. So
I'm not sure I've done that consciously, but that's quite nice to know that that's how they might be taken.
no, yeah, definitely.
And thinking back, yeah, I could see if I was reading one that I hadn't written and it was that on that vein. Yeah, I suppose it's a bit of a mystery where it comes from. It's like anything, isn't it? It's like when you sit down and you're doodling and something comes out. I doodle a lot, you know, and I do a lot of drawing as well. And I'll doodle, and then something will come out of that, and I'll think, "Wow, where did that come from?" Not it's going to sell it. It's not a Banksy, but to me, it's like, well, I didn't sit down to do that, and it will come out and it will mean something. Yeah, it's odd. I can't put an exact reason for it, but suffice to say that when I do it, it really does, as you say, the mental health aspect of it. I'll sometimes boost myself up because I'll think, you know, it's almost like looking in the mirror and giving yourself advice. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's just if you really look at a lot of people, especially people that maybe work in the city and they have a really busy hustle and bustling type of lifestyle, and you could say something like, when was the last time you doodled? When was the last time you messed around a bit and you balanced across a wall and you played around and, you know, and it's like just a little thing like that could be the difference between having a good day and having a bad day. You know, just taking that 5 minutes to just do a doodle, relax your mind, rest yourself a little bit, and then carrying on with whatever the strenuous activities you've got going on, or you know, going back into your child mind in a way and just sort of playing around with stuff and just seeing where the creativity goes and where it takes you. And you know, you can start writing a couple of words as like a poem, and then think, oh, I like the way that this is leading, and then before you know it, you've got like a massive, you know, 2-page spread poem on the go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know why I sent those two particularly, and I've written quite a few that are just frivolous. And just, I wrote one a long time ago. I don't know if you saw it, but it was down the lines of, I think it was, should I, shan't I, won't I, maybe I just might, should I run and hide away or should I stay and fight? What was the other? And it goes on the lines of, maybe I'll just wait and see because being indecisive really isn't me.
No, yeah, I like that.
There's stuff that will come out like that, and I'll just think, you know, I might hear the word indecisive, and I'll think, that sort of made me, you know. I mean, my favourite poem, and I didn't write this, and I don't even know who the author was, and it was the first poem I remember as a child hearing, and it was the play on the word weather and weather, the climate weather, and it was whether the weather be fine or whether the weather be not, whether the weather be cold or whether the weather be hot, or whether the weather, whatever the weather, whether we like it or not. The first poem I remember reading, and I think my mother got a secondhand poetry book. There was quite a few things. There was a few Spike Milligan ones. There was various, and I can't remember who the author of that is. But so I've written some little frivolous ones before. My favourite all-time poem is the shortest one, and it's called Atoms, and it's Adam Haddam.
That's it.
Adam. You know? Like, but yeah, I don't really know. I think it is. I think anyone who does anything, like you say, that gets them away from the grind, it's quite helpful. I think beneficial for your health, because you're doing it. You don't have to do. You know, we all have. You have your duty as a soldier. I had my duty as a police officer, and you have people have expectations of you. But with poetry, with something I write, it's mine. It doesn't matter if if I like it, it doesn't matter. A lot of the time, I never ever showed anyone, you know. But there's that thing that I've written that, and I like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, yeah, I completely get it. There's so most of the poetry that I've written, I've not written that many, to be honest. The poetry that I've written has all been sort of military based, and I've written one about my brother and being in the fire service and how that's similar to, you know, the brotherhood of the army. And but there's one I'm working on now, which is completely different. It's like a I'm still working on it. It's kind of like a comedy kind of poem, but mental health / comedy kind of poem, and it's something that I've not done before, so I'm kind of struggling with doing something differently, but I'm enjoying it because it's something different. But that
it's the construction of that's also enjoyable.
One of the poems that I saw of yours was about the aliens thinking about visiting Earth. I thought that was quality.
Yeah,
very true as well. Like, why would you come here?
Yeah, I've written a few like that, and out of the few that I thought, I don't really, it's not really what I wanted to say. Almost like buying 3 cars and building a good, 3 classic, building a good one. That poem out of the other 3 that I've still got as drafts, but I just did it because I thought, I can't even remember what spurred me on. It was something definitely about, are there aliens? I think I was watching a documentary or something. I thought, and someone said, maybe they visited Earth. And I thought, if I visited this planet, the first thing I'd say is, I want to speak to the manager. Do you know what I mean? So I just wrote, I've got no truck with the human race, and I love people, and we're all brothers and sisters, but sometimes people might read my, God, he's dark, or he's depressing, or what wouldn't come to. And there's some beautiful people on the earth, some beautiful things, and a beautiful place. But I just, again, I got a bit frivolous, and I thought,
no,
I'm
yeah,
going to do, the aliens aren't going to come near us. But there was in there as well. There was the thought of, are we really, what we're doing to ourselves?
Yeah, exactly. It's a double-edged weapon, double-edged message. So it was. I'm trying to think. I was mentioning the one Legatum about how much time you have left on this earth, and what kind of, if you remember, I don't know how many you've written. Have you racking your brains to know what that one is, or do you remember that one?
Yeah, that one was heartfelt. That was meant. I haven't read it for ages, but it's the one about
our time on this earth is short.
Yeah, is it one that ends with about being happy? Maybe it's just about happy. Yeah. I think I mentioned to you when we were having all this problems getting online on Zoom. I'm not sure we mentioned it here, but about my friend Terry Martin, who was a member of 3PAR. He joined in 1983. He joined in 79, and he was in the Falkland Islands. And he then ended up, he did his 22 and ended up, when the offices, the recruitment offices had serving soldiers doing it, and he was in charge. I think came out of WO2. But anyway, he was tragically killed in a road traffic collision, and he was sort of, I'll say the last. I can't remember how long after, but about a year after my brother Des dropped dead of a sudden heart attack. He was 58. 59 at the time, and prior to that, basically a run of bad luck. My father died at 80, which wasn't bad innings, and then my wife's brother, who was only in his 40s, got cancer, and he was dead within weeks, and then she lost her dad, and then I'd had a run of it. And then a detective inspector, Barry Ward, absolutely lovely man. He was my DI at the time I was in CID. He suddenly went sick with some pains in his back and never came back to work. A few months later, he was dead of it. So over about 18 months, 2 years, I lost a lot of people that were quite important to me and close. And it got me thinking, people shouldn't be hanging around with me too much, because I might be lucky. I have to use humour to get through it, you see. But 2, that's what that poem's about. The fact that it sort of made you. I've seen it in the police, and you know, you've seen it, but you suddenly become. We all know that that's the inevitable end, you know, but we spend our lives repudiating that fact. We spend our lives just overlooking it, or, you know, and quite rightly so, because you've got to get on with living, and it's all about today. And then suddenly something comes into your life that completely throws you off balance, and that's then in the forefront of my mind, and I'm thinking, what's the point of it all? Why are we doing all this? Why are we here? And I just got to the end of, I think the poem says about happiness, doesn't it, at the end?
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I could look it up. I wrote it along. I just sent it to Susie and yourself when she asked for some poems. But yeah, that was what that was about. That was actually physically sitting down, trying to work it out in my head.
Yeah, I think those one of the first words I think is our time on this earth is short, and when I think about that, it's just so true.
Yeah,
and the amount of times that, you know, you take that for granted, and you just don't think about how short our time is here. And
yeah.
you know, I've got my phone here, and the amount of times that I've been sat here looking at my phone, that's the distance of my vision is from my here to my phone, you know.
Yeah.
Which is insane, you know, when I've got one life and I've got this whole world to explore.
Yeah.
Yet I'm either sat behind a desk at you know, at work, or when I've got a bit of time off and I feel like relaxing, I'll probably just, you know, lie down, have a little relax, sit on the sofa, pull out my phone, and it's so sad. Like there must be, there's more to life.
Yeah.
And just realizing that and going, hang on a minute, right? It's okay to use my phone in modesty, in moderation. And then go out for a walk and go see, you know, somewhere you've never been and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's what I took from your poem, and that's why I said Scared Stiff and Legatum are sort of like speeches in a way to, you know, self-help and improve your life. So I really appreciated those poems. So thank you very much.
Cheers, Ash. And I think what I was trying to say in that was, I actually am none the wiser for it. I'm none the wiser what it's all about. That's why the end bit said, well, it must be just happiness, being happy, because I seriously have thought about it, and when all those people had died, you know, and I still didn't get to the bottom of it. So I thought, do you know what? That's all we've got left. That's all it's about, is smiling, and, you know, if you can make a few other people smile, and that was it really. And I'm not saying I'm right, I'm not saying I'm wrong, I don't know.
No. So whereabouts, so you say in the police, whereabouts is your sort of your beat, your area?
Well, I've always been in Hampshire Police, Hampshire Constabulary. I live down in Portsmouth on the south coast, and I have to plug this, the only island city. And but I live down here, and you probably know Aldershot, from not far from me.
Not overly well, but you know, the Pleasure Regiment's in Colchester now, so
was the home of the Paras when I was in the mob. But so I've been various things. I started off response and patrol, like everyone did. You do your training, 2 years probation, response and patrol. And then I did a burglary squad thing, which was just plain clothes stuff, and then went into CID and and did some various bits and bobs, like work with the National Crime Agency, doing raids, mainly for drugs, vice stuff, and I had some great fun, because I did the royal wedding, because basically other like people like the Met, it's called mutual aid, so they ask other constabularies, we've got this big thing, and the pot of money comes from the Home Office, and constabularies, you just put your name down, an email gets sent out. So I made myself busy doing stuff like that. The Trump visit, Operation Viscount, I was involved on that all through the security bit at the beginning, and then on the day. I was a beat officer as well, for quite a while at the housing estate, and I loved it.
Did that give you inspiration? Is there any poems that sort of you've written that centralize around your career?
Yeah, I've written. Not really to do with the policing aspect, but things that I've come across and seen during that period of my life. So certain like I say, you know yourself, you get inspiration from various things. Sometimes things you wouldn't think are inspiring. But yeah, I've written stuff, but it's mainly stuff that's come through while I'm doing the job, but not particularly about police, you know?
Yeah, I think that close down of Afghanistan and seeing that on the news gave me a bit of inspiration to start writing a poem about that. And then my wife wrote a poem about it as well, and it completely blew my poem out of the water. So I just kind of sacked my one off and then stuck with her one. But it was a really good poem. I was quite proud of, very proud of her actually. But yeah, that you've got to look for inspiration everywhere, really, haven't you? Like,
yeah, and it comes from the, you know, I mean, I don't know where it comes from, but sometimes I'll be sometimes this doesn't happen a lot, and it's only happened maybe twice, 2 or 3 times, where I've woken up in the night for no apparent reason and gone downstairs and written something down. And it on I think 2 occasions it didn't amount to anything. I never wrote. I've got this book, and if you looked at it, it's all sorts of scribbles and writing and crossings out and spelling mistakes and stuff I've written in there, the odd bit of shopping list. But there's not, you know, there's been a couple of times where something's come into my head, but I think to myself, do you know what? That's in the book. I might get another piece of that jigsaw. It's almost like a crime, you know, where you look out and you look for the CCTV and slowly all the little bits of information come together like a puzzle. And I look at it like that. I've got all these little bits that don't really mean anything. But it might be that little piece. I'll be writing a poem and I'll say, oh, that's a nice phrase, and bug it in there later.
You ever thought about writing a book? It sounds like you've got a lot of poetry and you've got a lot of knowledge on it.
I've never really thought about it. You mean poems? Put it in?
Yeah, like a poetry book.
Yeah, never really thought about it. I've probably got enough for a book, but I wouldn't. I'm not saying I wouldn't know how to go about it, but publishing and I haven't really thought about it.
Yeah,
like I say, most of the time, when I was a kid, I didn't like to. I had a laugh and a joke with my mates, and I loved limericks. You know, listen to the grown-up ones and then tell them at school. You know, try not to get rude words and all that like you do as a kid. But no, I never used to show my writings.
Yes,
writing in the back of books.
Yeah, strange, isn't it? It's like poetry isn't seen as cool, but rap, like a rap song, which is all it is rhythm and poetry. Yeah, and that's cool.
Yeah. But I mean, if you look at people like Rudyard Kipling and that, and you think even in his day was he cool? Did people perceive him as? And I don't know, because I've never spoke to anyone from his era. But you look at people like him and Keats, and you read their poems, and you think, wonder what people made of them. You know,
especially the love poems and stuff. People that write love poetry are probably like, "Oh, what are you up to, you soppy git?"
yeah. And your world, which is still obviously macho, and the world I came from, the culture of the police has changed slowly. But you know, like I say, when I joined the army, and it's very much. You need to fit in, don't you? You almost feel like you have to fit in. I don't know what it's like in this day and age, but
no, definitely.
And you don't want to be seen as the outside. You don't want to be seen as that Viney. They used to call me Viney. He writes poetry, you know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want to be thought of that way. He's a good regimental boxer, him, or he's good at football or whatever. Not. Yeah, he writes a bit of poetry, that lad.
No, you're completely right as well, because even the poems I do write, I write them in a kind of a macho way. So one of them is Brothers Forged by Fire, and it's about staring at death, and being beside your brother in a firefight and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a macho poem. So it's trying to write poetry, but also keep face.
Yeah. I've got one that I've written about that, a military style poem that I'm going to unleash on Facebook for Remembrance Day, about poppies. So I put it on before a few years back, or did I put it last year? But I'm going to unleash that again. But that's one that I think I would have got away with in my time in the military, because they've all gone, whoa, you know what it's like.
Proper, like, you know, like get you pumped sort of poem, like, yes, that's mega. That.
Yeah, it's all about that, you know, and quite rightly so. Remembrance is a special time, isn't it? Especially for people like me and you. But yeah, but other poems I would have kept to myself. It's crazy, isn't it? We all do that. We all stick that mask on, and we don't want to be seen. I don't want to ever be seen. I didn't like it as a kid, being seen as the vulnerable one. And like I say, I didn't have a great childhood, but what I did is, if you ever speak to anyone who knows me well, they'll say, oh, Viney the Joker, he was the class clown. He was always, I was nicknamed the Laughing Policeman, because I used humour as my shield. I needed humour. You know, I'm not a big bloke. I've always been 11, 12 stone, even as a soldier, police officer. I'm 5'7", and nearly everyone was bigger than me at school. But I was quite popular because I was the guy, hey, go and get, he's got a load of jokes. Or it was my arse. They were my weapon. I had jokes and I had the front to carry it off, and the cheeky one, you know, and it worked for me. I've mellowed a bit, but I've sort of carried it on into my adult life, and it's what's seen me through. I think if I hadn't, I'd have left the party many years ago. You know, but yeah. So
when you talk about the masks, the masks that you're saying there is this. Depending on what you do as a living and who you perceive yourself to be, you could have hundreds of masks on you at the same time. So, for instance, you're in the forces, you wear a certain mask. You're in the army, there's another mask on top of that. You're in the infantry, there's an infantry mask. You're in the parachute regiment, there's a parachute regiment mask that's on top of all those other masks. And then what rank you are, there's another mask that goes on top, because you've got to act a certain way, being that rank. And then, you know, and then when you strip all those masks down, there's just another vulnerable person underneath it all, surely.
Yeah, she's another person trying to get through life, and you know, your whole reason for you doing this about mental health, and it's a worthy thing, because, you know, especially now, I think the good thing is, I mean, we all knew it. I lived through the Vietnam War as a kid. You know, I remember it ending in 76, I think it was. And I lived in Hayling. I came from Hayling Island. I don't know if you know it, a small island on the south coast with a bridge to the mainland. It's probably only about 5 miles by 5 miles, and that's where I was born and grew up. Pretty much everyone knew each other. The mainlanders used to say everybody was related, but it's not true. But it's now pretty much retirement people from London. But I remember the Vietnamese boat people moving into Thorney Island, which was the Air Force base that had closed about a year before. And Britain pretty much took the refugees in those days. And I remember them coming over to Hayling Island and rubbing shoulders with these strange people from another land. And, you know, I'd heard it on the news. But even then, we all know now the terrible mental health those troops suffered, the American troops. No one really went there, did they? No one spoke about it.
Yeah.
And I think nowadays we're a lot better, especially in the forces, in the army, in the police. Even when I joined the police, it was, you'd go to a serious incident or a terrible accident with road deaths, or, you know, a sudden death or something. And it was very much a culture. And I think it worked at the time, is you went up to the bar and you had a drink and everyone took the piss out of you, and you dealt with it there, and then you went home. Not really the way to do it. It worked, but there was alcohol involved, you know. There was no professional sort of input. So I think now, I don't know how you, I'm not in the modern army, but I don't know how you feel, whether that's got better, and people are, especially in your world, parachute regiment, very proud regiment, you know, we were all crap hats, and you lot were all God, and quite rightly so. You've earned it. But
thanks, I'll take that. But yeah,
yeah, it was almost like your battalions in the old days. I rubbed shoulders with Terry and other paras, and when I went to police, we took over from 3 para, I think. But it was almost 3rd battalion is better than the second better than third, first, And there was even that rivalry within. And I come from Royal Regiment of Artillery. I was in 26th Field. And there was always, we are better than air defence because we fired the big howitzers. And 7th RHA, Royal Horse Artillery, consider themselves paras, or the parachute train, just like the engineers. And there was always that, well, we wear the maroon beret and you lot have got black berets. And, you go around saying ubique and all that Latin crap. And yeah, there was all that rivalry. And it is very much macho. And I think the police changed, and I think the army's changing for the better. And I think the wars that you guys have just been through, which I never experienced, I was during the British Army on the Rhine years in Northern Ireland. I think that's helped a lot. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's a strange one, because I suppose back in your time there was no social media, so if you could shut yourself away, or you'd have to go and socialize. Whereas now, people that want to socialize, they don't have to actually physically go and see somebody; they just do it online. Which, for some ways, that's better, because they can literally access any help at any time if they need to. But in other ways, it's bad because they can just shut themselves away and not speak to anyone. So it's a double-edged sword. But the army's view on it, I think, has definitely improved massively. And I think that's down to, again, the realization of, I think some of it may have come from pressures from media outlets as well. It's like, when you see it on the news or on social media, it hits home more when you hear about, a soldier committing suicide, or a soldier on the streets. And we talked about the media being a little bit negative with the fear side of things, but then I suppose in the positive way, it brings information to light about statistics. And I'm not saying like mainstream media, but social media. If somebody decides that they're going to write a survey on how many people have committed suicide, I mean, it's easy to get that information out now, rather than before you'd have to approach a newspaper, or you'd have to approach somebody else. But so in some ways, it's media is again, it's a double-edged sword. And the army's method or approach to improving mental health has definitely come on leaps and bounds. And again, that's just it's going to happen naturally through time anyway, with scientific breakthroughs and realization of the human mind.
I think we're encouraged to talk more now, and I think the poetry side of things is a way I can talk, even most of the time, because until I knew about you, met you through Susie and Susie on, as you say, on social media, it pretty much I was talking to myself with the poetry. So I was almost unpacking certain issues and problems and again, like I say, I'm not necessarily right in my opinions in it, even my political ones, but I suppose it was my therapy.
Just in the same way as learning. I don't know if learning, you have like 3 different types of ways that people learn: audio, visual, and kinesthetic, which is like hands-on. And the same way as like expressing yourself. Some people express themselves audially, or they might listen to music, and that helps calm them down. It helps them realize their emotions, and listen to some music, go for a run, and that calms them down. And then you've got people that read and write, like yourself and I, that might write something down, and that helps us express ourselves. And then you've got kinesthetic people that have to do something active, whether again, if it's like a run, or physically playing an instrument, so you're hitting the kinesthetic and the audio learn or release. So it's just different people accomplish things in different ways and get over emotional or mental bumps in the road in different manners. So
what works for you?
Exactly. I'm going to move on to the dreaded question that I ask everyone, and that's the most courageous thing. So what is the most courageous thing that you have ever seen or heard of?
Two things really. One, I touched on it before, Terry, God rest his soul, who who was, I'll tell you the circumstances. He was 3-power like yourself. Wonderful man, really nice bloke, proper tough, pompey lad, proper, you know. There are various stories from when he was in the Falklands. You know, they were checking after the Argentinians got overthrown. They were checking buildings and be very careful because they could have booby trapped him. Not Terry's running along kicking the doors. His mate said, "What you doing?" He said, "I'm effing hungry. I'm looking for food." Words to that effect. You know, proper good, tough man, but a nice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He used to rib me about being a copper, and we'd have a laugh. And he was my neighbour. He lived over the road as well. But yeah, so he's driving along. He's finished in the army. He was a recruitment officer. Recruitment ran the Southampton one. Then the civvies took it over, civvy company. Anyway, he'd got a job driving carers about, people who cared for old age pensioners, and you know, he'd take them to various houses. And he was on one of those trips in a car, and I'll never forget. It was February. It was drizzling. And I'd heard, I was on duty. I didn't go to it. I'd heard there was an accident. Never knew what it was all about. Just as you do, you pick up these things on the radio. You know, traffic unit, road death investigation team being sent, which was quite hard for me to deal with. And I'm not sure why, because I hear lots of things, but it's just finding out after it was someone close. But yeah, he's going down. He's turning off. He sees a car crash on the slip road, and a woman trapped. So he jumps out of his car. He's got an earpiece in, one of these Bluetooth, and he's also dialing the police. So this is all heard by the control room. And he's basically trying to get this woman out of a trapped car. Wasn't burning or anything, but she's quite bad injured. And unfortunately, dark, raining, a car came up the slip road really fast, crashed into the car that he was trying to help, and him also, and killed him. Yeah, that was really hard to deal with. Yeah, courageous side of things. And you know, if I played that in my head and it wasn't a real scenario, and someone said, who would you say would do that sort of thing? It would have been Terence. You know, he'd have pulled that person out of the car. Yeah. And another one, a colleague of mine, when she was out in plain clothes, really good friends. She was out with another colleague, and they were arresting some drug addict in a park, and he stabbed him 3 times. And missed his heart by an inch, missed his lung, nicked his lung, missed his kidney. He's alive and kicking and well, thank God. It was probably about 6-7 years ago. But the way she dealt with that at the scene at the time, how courageous she was in helping him, how cool she was on the radio. Yeah, various things like that. There's been quite a few, but I think Terry stands out, out of the crowd, really.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, I was trying to explain this on my last podcast to one of the other guests. Was like in the human, I might as well just go through it again. In the human body, you get red blood cells and white blood cells, and the red blood cells just carry oxygen from one place to another. That's their life form. They go around, they take oxygen over there, then they come back, they get some more oxygen. That's their life. That's what they do in their life. And you get white blood cells that go the same, they go up and down with the red blood cells. But when they see something go wrong, when they see an accident, when they see a tragedy happening or something that needs to be dealt with, the white blood cells will rush in and they'll fix that injury, or they'll fix that, the illness or that problem that needs solving. And some people, that's some people. Some people are those white blood cells that will rush in and be the first on the scene and be the ones to help. And it's the soldiers, it's the police, the fire brigade, the ambulance service, the medics, and the NHS staff are white blood cells that are there to save the body, to save the system, to keep everyone else safe. So So absolute hats off to you, doing your your blue service in the police, and obviously your green service in the army as well.
Thanks, sir.
I always think about the police and how you're always on duty. You're on the front line.
Yeah.
When a soldier goes away, they could go away for a 6-month tour, which is intense 6-month tour.
Yeah.
But then they'll come back and they may have a year and a half training ready for another deployment in another year and a half or so. But the police are constantly on that rotation of every day you just put on the uniform and you step out your house and you're going to work, or even at where you're in a dangerous and vulnerable position. So thank you for your service. I know you've retired now, is that correct?
Yeah. I have to say thanks for yours as well, Ash, because without the army, especially now with the tankers and the things over the years filling in with the fire brigades, I never did that, but had mates who did, and those awful green goddesses. Don't know if you heard about them. They were about 30 now with a bell on it. But I finished September the 4th on my 55th birthday last year, and funnily enough, I went to work with my wife at a private school, so I'm a caretaker there now. Nice. Going around changing bulbs.
Hey, still caring for people, still looking after people. This is so how old were you when you joined the army?
I was 17 and a half.
So 50, and then you left the police at 55. So that's the majority of your life has just been in service to other people.
In uniform, basically. Yeah, it's been quite not hard. It's just been, when I came out of the army, it wasn't so bad because I was going into another uniform role. But coming out of the police, having been in the army and then the police, it was quite a shock to the system, really. And I've taken a year to adjust. I've adjusted all right. I've actually written a little bit of a poem about adjustment, and but so
well, thank you for your service, and thank you for your time coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. What I've gonna do is I'm gonna put the Scared Stiff poem at the beginning of this, so people know what we're talking about when we're talking about that poem. But if there's any before I go, is there anything that you want to plug? You should definitely create a website or a YouTube channel or write a book, because your poetry is amazing. So is there any way that people could find your work?
Pretty much. Well, not really. The only thing is now and again when I think there's a message, or I just like the sound of it, and I suppose I want people to see my poetry. It's not an arrogant thing. I've hidden it in the past, but every now and again. So really, at the moment, only on my Facebook. But I might look into that and just do another social media site, Facebook site with just poetry, and invite others to send theirs in. So sort of,
well, you can always use my platform. If there's any poetry you want to get out there, I'm happy to put it out there, as long as it's not too political and all that sort of stuff.
Brilliant. All right, Ash. No, I might put a bit of my, some funny stuff, and that's very kind of you. I might use that. I'd like to plug just a quick one. Forgotten Veterans UK, if I can. I don't know if you know, but down in Portsmouth, there's a fort called Fort Cumberland. It's in a place called Eastney. It's one of the old Palmerston's Victorian forts when we were all paranoid the French were going to invade.
The only part of Pompey that down there that I've seen is the military historical docks. It's amazing.
This is a fortification that's owned by Portsmouth City Council, and half of it was loaned, I suppose, to some local veterans who they do a great job. I met up with them in Southsea. I didn't really understand what they did. They were doing some charity work where 4 of their guys, really old ex-soldiers, were sleeping for a whole week in Portaloos on the seafront. And they had a little cookhouse, and they weren't even allowed to move out of there. So they had various books, and they were sleeping sort of, you can imagine, in a portaloo in the old Green Army maggots. And it was brilliant. People were beeping at them and throwing them money. But these guys are amazing. They basically work out that if there's a veteran, either serving or not, who is falling on hard times, they'll help. Or if they find one suicidal, even the police can get in touch with them, and often do, saying, look, we've got this soldier, he's drunk, he's suicidal, we've taken him or he's gone to the hospital. They're all over the country. They've got members that will volunteer to go and pick that soldier up, ex-soldier, take them down to this place and then sit with them, almost like on guard with them. And there's local psychiatric professionals who do it part-time, other than their work as a charity, will come out and visit them and give them the help.
Oh, that's amazing. That's perfect. Yeah. Where's the best place to find them? Is it?
If you look on Forgotten Veterans, put it into the search engine on your Google.
Okay, perfect.
They'll come up. So yeah, I'd like to plug them, because I think, to do that, to have members all over, yourself, like, all call signs, and, and again, it's another thing. Social media is great in this day and age of mental health. Whereas someone's struggling, there's a network of people, because we can all talk to each other.
Yeah, it's like when somebody goes missing, somebody's gone missing. I haven't seen this person in a week. They don't know where they are, and then it spreads across the internet. And somebody goes, "Yeah, I've seen them here." And it's like, okay, they're safe, brilliant. But
yeah.
All right, Ellis, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I'll put the link to the charity event in the description for this episide, and
Thanks,
I'll also put as many of your poetry as you want me to. I'll bang it on there as well.
Yeah, I'll start sending you some more.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ash.
I'll speak to you. Hello, everyone. You're listening to Blue Pigment Podcast. If you want to become a patron of this show, please go to patreon.com/Blue Pigment. You will be helping me help the talent that I find along the way. Not only that, the podcast is an advocate for mental health and the positive message in which we want to send about mental health. So if you are a bit about that and you want to jump on board, then please become a patron at patreon.com/Blue Pigment. Would love to have you on board. And not only that, you'll get the chance to get some free stuff and be giving another big giveaway soon. To find out what it is, go to patreon.com/Blue Pigment, become a patron, and get yourself some free stuff. The opinions or views expressed on this podcast are solely of my own or the guests, and do not represent the opinions or views of anybody else or the Ministry of Defence.
Shish kebab, Shawshank Redemption, Chicago! You're out of there!